Hello, and welcome back to the ArchFlow framework session series. In the last session, we looked at the ArchFlow repository and its internals. In this session, we'll take a look at real project, the branching model, the session control commands, and the foundation phase. This is how we initialize the project and break the initial requirements document into the foundational artifacts. Since it would take too much time to show you the whole solution design process using ArchFlow. Instead, for the next couple of sessions, we will focus on an existing project and explain the process so that by the end of the session series, you should be able to start the project on your own and try to come up with a solution design by yourself. Having said that, let's jump right into it. Before we jump into the foundational phase and the commands available there, let's first talk about the branching model and the session control commands available with the ArchFlow. As we have mentioned in some of the previous sessions, the ArchFlow utilizes an architecture as code principle, meaning that all the architecture documents and projects that we are working on are part of the same repository, and that we support or allow multiple users to work on different projects in parallel. What that means is basically that every project gets an folder associated with it, which lives under the architectures folder, and it's basically named after the project ID. So the project ID is the first attribute that we assign when we initialize the project, and based on that, we then assign or create the containing folder and the working branch as well. Now, the ArchFlow also uses a one-to-one mapping between the project and the working branch. There is a single branch for every project where all the commits or updates for that given project are committed. That largely simplifies basically the integration with the AI agents and how the agent actually looks or switches between the projects and how it keeps track about the changes as such. The information about the current selected project that we are working on is reflected to the AI agent through a file, which is located inside the .archflow session folder, and it's called the active project. And whenever we switch to a project, that file gets updated with the project ID in it, and it allows the AI agent basically to know which project we are working on so that it can update the right files and gather the right context to be able to execute the prompt commands that we have available with the ArchFlow framework. So that's basically how we propagate the information. Now, when we want to select different projects or see what projects are available, in the repository, we can utilize the ArchFlow select command. But before we run it, let's maybe first check it out and what parameters it provides. So before we dive deeper, let me just note that most of the commands of the ArchFlow framework follow the same structure. The first section usually provides a detailed description about what the command does, followed by a trigger section, which provides details when the command is usually run. That's mainly there to integrate it or provide context to the AI agent. And then it's followed usually by an input variables section, which lists all the input parameters that the command accepts, basically. And for the ArchFlow select, we can see that we have two working modes. On one side, you can provide it the project ID that you want to select or continue working on, or you can just run it without any parameters and just get back a list of all available projects. So for our use case, let's maybe just run it without any commands and get back a list of all available projects. The AI agent will now execute basically that prompt and come back with all the available projects that we have, and provide us also with a means to select any of those projects. And sure enough, we get back basically a small list of just one project. That's basically what we have in our repository. And we can now select it basically. And that's what we are going to do. And once we have done that, the AI agent will automatically detect the project ID. It will switch us to that project branch, which you'll see here. And now you can see it basically we just switched from master to that Bonnie Tourism project branch, and it will update also the active project file and marking the projects as active now. In the end, it will also come back with the quick status update containing the project name, the branch we are using, the get status, the clarifications that we have resolved or any blocking ones, and when the project was lastly updated. So once we have switched or selected basically an existing project, we want to know how far we have been. I mean, since the last time we have worked on it, where we are, what needs to be done next. And for that, we can utilize the ArchFlow status command. But before we do that, let's also evaluate or check what the command also provides. We can see basically that the command provides a detailed status summary of the project. It lists all the artifacts that have been created. It provides us some information about the phase which we are currently in the project, and so that we know and where to pick it up. As we can see here, the project ID is obvious, parameter is obviously optional because it can automatically figure out what the selected project is. So we can just run the command without any parameters. And hopefully get back a detailed summary of the project status. The AI agent will now go through all the artifacts available so far in the project, evaluate them, and then come back with a detailed description about the progress. And as we can see, the report, the initial section of the report out, I mean, it's pretty similar to the ArchFlow status output, but it's then followed with more detailed description about the artifact summary, where the output shows all the artifacts across all the phases which are available and completed so far. We can see that in this example we have only 2 artifacts missing in the last design phase. That's the architecture overview document and the solution architecture document. It also contains information about the gate progress. We can see that we have come up to gate 4 with some of warnings basically in the security and the infra ops phase. And there is also some information about the clarification. If there are any blocking ones or pending, we can see that we have all of the 15 recommendations or clarifications in the foundation phase handled or resolved. And at the end, we usually get a recommendation from the AI agent what commands to run next and what to work on next, basically. That's usually helpful, I mean, when you come back after some time and want to continue working on a project. So that gives you the basic overview how you control the session around your projects, how you switch between the project, and how the AI agent tracks basically your work across them. With that said, let's now look at the foundation phase, how it looks like, what process we have in that phase. And for that, we will look or open the README file, which contains a dedicated section explaining the foundation phase and the commands in there. When we want to start working on a new project, we want first to create a skeleton with all the directory substructures, all the metrics files, templates copied into it so that we can start working on it. And that's exactly what the ArchFlow.start command does. Basically, it creates a skeleton, copies all the template files from the .archflow folder, initializes them, and makes your project basically ready for any follow-up commands. The input that we need to provide for that command is usually just the project ID, short description of the project, and so on. Once we have the skeleton structure set up with the start command, we now need to provide the foundation phase with an requirements document. That's basically the input to the foundation phase, out of which we basically then create a whole list of artifacts which are then utilized during the next design phases. The requirements document is usually in form of a textual or MD file, which we get during the requirement session meetings with the customer, out of which we create basically that requirements document, listing all the necessary asks by the customer for the solution, and that's what we give it basically to the ArchFlow ingest requirement command. That command will then break basically information from that document into a specific set of artifacts. It will identify exactly all the requirements that we have in that document and list them in a separate document called the requirements MD file. It will identify all the user stories out of that document and list them also separately in an artifact. It will also identify any non-functional requirements and make them part of the quality attributes MD file, and it will also check any constraints that we might have in the document and reflect those also in a standalone artifact as well. That command will also copy that original requirements document into the raw directory, which you can maybe also see right here. From the foundation phase, we can see basically that it contains the original requirements document with which the command ingest requirements was run. This is just so that we keep reference basically what the output of the artifacts map to. Once we have run the ingest requirements command and come up with the first set of artifacts for the foundation phase, then we can run the ArchFlow context command. That context basically builds the business requirements, provides basically, identifies all the actors, the data flows, and so on from the requirements document, and builds basically the description around what needs to build by the solution. It's important to know that in the foundation phase, we actually provide the answer to what the solution should solve, not how it should be solved. That's handled by the follow-up design phases as such. And that context command also produces on itself a set of artifacts documents. One of those is a context, which provides the business context, basically. Then we have also the stakeholders. We're listing all the stakeholder in the solution, a glossary file as well, explaining all the different terms used across the solution. And then also in the end, it builds the C4 size system diagram containing the main components, high-level components of the solution. Once we have executed the ArchFlow context command, we have now a full set of the artifacts that are required now for the design phases as such. But before we can go on into the design itself, we need to run another command, which is the ArchFlow clarify, and which helps us to identify any gaps, any open questions that are still present in the requirements artifacts and keep the quality basically of the foundation phase up to standard. The output of the ArchFlow clarify command is basically a clarification artifact, which contains a list of all open questions, which can be either answered by the artifact directly, or you basically need to go back to the customer, discuss those questions, and then come back and answer those individually then with the ArchFlow clarify command again. In that way, you are basically building a high quality foundation for any of the follow-up design phases, which is very important because all of those design phases which come up next in the workflow depend highly on the quality of the foundation phase and the information captured in those artifacts. So you can see basically you start with the start command to create the architecture project skeleton. You then ingest and create the initial set of artifacts with the ingest requirements, giving the requirements document as input, followed by the ArchFlow context command, which builds the overall business context, the stakeholders, the glossaries, and so on, including the C4 system diagram. And then you go into the clarify and answer process, which you repeat until you have basically all the open questions answered and clarified. After that, you can then run basically the analyze command, which is available throughout all of the design phases of the framework to basically, once again, verify that you have all the available artifacts meeting the gate or given gate criteria, and just making sure basically that you don't skip any steps before you go to the next design phase. At this step, I mean, once you have the analyze command and it passes, then you can move on basically to the next phase. Okay, having said that, let's maybe now look into the given artifacts for this solution, example solution, and see what those commands actually resulted in. For this project, for example, maybe we can start with the context document, and just to give you a brief example of what information you usually get when you run through the foundation phase. In the context document, you get basically an overview section first, describing the solution requirements. I mean, why we are building that. You get the short business context. You get key drivers listed here, key decisions driven obviously by the questions, all the qualifications here listed as well. You get listed out or pointed out the system boundaries, exactly the system context diagram, which can be found in the diagrams directory here. You also get listed the actors, the system actors, and any external dependencies that you have upstream and downstream, obviously. About the environment as well, the organizational context, technical environment, operational model, and success factors. So all those information actually which describe what we are building basically with the solution as such. We can maybe also look at the quality or non-functional requirements document, just to provide you a brief overview. Obviously here, based on the project requirements, the AI agent has identified here all the security attributes or requirements here. All of those elements basically or artifacts are numbered, and those IDs are kept inside the manifest file here in the ID registry, and all the links between those entities are then reflected in the traceability YAML file, which the AI agent obviously uses throughout the workflow to keep track and build its own internal picture about the solution. Then we might look at the requirements document or artifact as well. You can see that we have here listed all the requirements, actually raw requirements with the IDs, including the priority for each one of those for the given solution here. Maybe we can also look at the stakeholders, which identifies all the known stakeholders with the IDs and their key concerns, basically their names and types as well. There's also a detailed description actually about each stakeholder, what their goal is, what their main pain points are, and how they interact basically with the solution. And there's also a communication matrix for each stakeholder at the end as well. What else is interesting? The clarifications are obviously one important item that we also mentioned before. So this is basically how the clarification document looks like. At the beginning, you have the summary, which lists all the clarification or open questions by priority, starting with P1, P2, and P3, blocking important and nice to have. You can see actually how many of them you have in the open state, how many are in the progress state, and how many are resolved. And initially, you will have all of them basically in the open state, and then as you answer them by running the ArchFlow clarify command, you move them basically through the different stages. This is basically then followed by all of those open questions one by one, where every question is basically stated together with the category that it falls into, the impact, the context of the open question, and also some of the options basically that you have. The AI agent will basically evaluate all of the open question and provide some of the possible answers to that, so that you have some idea already in what direction the answer might go to, and that you have some additional information when you maybe go back to the customer and discuss those questions as well. Then at the end, for those open questions, you have the status, the resolution, which option was picked, who it was resolved by, and the resolve date, basically. And then that goes for every of the open questions as such. And then we also have the user stories, which come out basically of that requirements document, which clearly list basically the solution requirements or goals in a clear way, using the SA, I want to, so that acceptance criteria approach. So that would be, or that would cover the foundational phase, which basically provides the foundation for the follow-up design phases, which we will look into the next session. Thank you very much, and see you soon.